Hello and welcome to this watercolour demonstration. You can see this is the palette of colours I'm going to be using today. I began this painting outside and it began to rain, so it's going to be finished off in the studio. So here we go, this is the painting. It's a Norfolk cottage. We've got some reflections. You can see that the idea is to get these telegraph poles leading the eye into the painting. I want to darken up around the cottages and these trees there, so we've got a very strong focal point. So I'm just deciding what to do in terms of putting in the third telegraph pole. Now, this is a mix. This is my palette, messy palette. It's a mixture of ultramarine and burnt umber. So I'm having a little practice of where I'm going to put it in. There's too close to the chimney. Just further to the right, leading into this bank of trees, looks like the right place. It's important. You can see how far back I'm holding the brush, as I'm going for a bit of control there, just sliding in. And not to go too high because we're going back and creating the illusion of recession and to perspective, and adding a few more details in on the telegraph poles, using my fingertips to drag things in and out. These are Skoda brushes, a very fine synthetic brush that retain a fantastic point, so you can get details. This is where we're at with this painting, really, finishing off details, finishing off tightening up the tonal qualities. And there we go, just straight in with the cabling, electric cable, and just across, just once, straight in, job done. So again, mixing up, this is Payne's Grey and Ultramarine this time. This is a number 6 Skoda brush. I'm going to start to work on some of the darks around and about the cottage, but first I'm going to bring in a bank of mid-ground trees, bushes, doesn't really matter, we're just suggesting. Notice that I'm linking all the way across. This creates unity. And again, I'll go across on the left hand side and do a similar exercise from the edge of the cottage all the way across to the edge of the paper. And that's that done, almost. Just going to put in a few more darker notes. Use my thumb to take out and create some highlights. Take out some of the darkness. So again, we've got Payne's Grey there on the end. It's quite a stiff mixture. Bringing in some more dark. Touch on the chimneys. Don't need to be too detailed. I'm just really creating where the shadows are, and then we're just going to bring around the eaves. Fingernail again. Fingernails are great for creating highlights. Yeah, this front part of the cottage and the window, the shape of it needs widening because it was too similar to the telegraph pole above it. So we've widened the opening. and touching around the eaves. So again, we've gone in for some small touch of ultramarine. These are Skoda brushes. You can see are made, the handle's made from metal. They're like a little travel brush. Just bringing in a few more darks in this middle distance. Leaving gaps where light can go through. So it's important in your painting to make sure you've got a whole variety of not only tones and colours, but also spaces in between to show through earlier washes or even the paper itself. This creates the term sparkle. Still working on this, but this painting has some themes running through it. We have several uprights, which are the telegraph poles. Again, mixing up some more Payne's grey. And there's uprights in terms of the trunks and the branches of the trees. The chimney pots have uprights. So you can say that that principle of the design is dominated by these uprights. In terms of space, we have a large sky, we have a large foreground and actually a large sort of middle ground that are just painted as simple washes. Still finessing around the chimneys. So in your paintings you want to be creating one single focal point, the place where the eye is going to go to first, and then you look around the rest of the painting from there, and the eye will always get drawn back to the darkest dark and the lightest light. The cottage itself is just the plain paper. At this point in the painting I've not used any gouache or Chinese white, which I sometimes use to bring in a few highlights. So at the moment this is what they call a pure watercolour. There's no added opaque colour in terms of the white. They're of course opaque. It's just a term that's not transparent. It means that you're not going to see through it. So changing to the number 2 Skoda, which is much finer, and now we're going to bring in just a few darker details in the branches. Again, holding the brush quite high on the handle to keep in the loose impressionistic feel to the painting. There's an old adage and an old rule of the great master painters, especially those impressionistic watercolourists: never spend more than 1 minute in any area of the painting, otherwise you start fiddling. So we're now going to use a spray gun to come in to the foreground and re-wet, re-dampen the painting. It's never a bad thing, it's always a good thing, because gravity does the work and the paint then starts to show through, and it's blending and it's bleeding, and that's what watercolour is all about, really, transparency. we're going to work again with the number 6 squirrel mop brush. Again, just using that same mixture that's there. It's going to take a little while to mess around with this and getting a colour that has the right. There we go, more towards a green. It's just using the back of my knuckle to test that the paper there is wet, so when I put the paint in, it's going to bleed in. You want edges that are soft. That means they're bleeding, they're melting, and also edges that are hard, where there's just the paint going onto the paper. So this is going to take a little while to get sorted. This is all the thinking time I'm putting together. What you didn't see there is on the end I mixed in some cadmium yellow, so we've kind of gone towards a green. All of this hovering around above the paper before committing is just to gather thoughts, think about what will happen when I actually launch into putting paint and brush to paper. So this is just getting the rough idea of where I want these reflections to come in. Fingers are great. And we know if we're going to do some dry brush or dragging across with the squirrel mop, which is a great little brush for that kind of effect, as you'll see a bit later when I attempt to put some dry brush work in the middle distance. See, what you want is that the paint is not only catching some of the water and starts to run, but also has some sharper edges. So there we go. I mixed up some cobalt blue with some cadmium for this green, and this is kind of just reflecting the trees in the distance. I think it's important to make sure that you have in between these darker patches, you've got your lights, because that's what's going to show up the reflections. And this blurred effect takes the eye away, because we could have sharp reflections in here that you might get, say, in a harbour scene where a boat is reflecting off some water. But this is a different feel, much softer. So when we're thinking about the principles of design, which we should be when we're putting together a painting, we need to be thinking about repetition. We said that there were repeating marks being made, that were going upwards, like the trunks and the telegraph poles being repeated. We have the repetition of the shadows in the foreground, this sort of blurred effect, and we're putting some more spray there. Here we go with some dry brush work into the middle. This is using the cadmium yellow and cobalt blue mixture. So this dry brush means that we've got a mixture of strokes. We have the wet into wet at the foreground. There's some wet in the wet in the background as well, in the distance and in the sky. We have drier brushwork in the middle distance that I put in earlier. We've also got the details as well with these smaller brushes. So I'm now going to go on and getting closer to the end of the painting on the finish, and that's just bringing in this number 2 Escoda brush and just again going to do some dry brush so we create some sparkle. In various places. So put in the cable, not everywhere, just in that one spot, so the light against the dark. So I need to put in some on the edge of the buildings, just a touch. A few dabs here and there, so a quick brush stroke to suggest light coming in. It's easy to overdo it with these whites. It's all about having a vision for the end of your painting. Many beginners say, well, when do you know when to stop when you're fiddling around? Well, experience will teach you that. That seems like a strange thing to say, that experience will teach you, but it really does. One of the things I do is to stand back and look at a painting and just get the overall feel. Squinting your eyes, you've heard this before, but it really does work because it narrows the tones. So you see the lighter lights and the darker darks more easily. And they can help you with the balance of a painting. There's several different balances. The main two kinds of balance are between the symmetry and the asymmetrical. So what you wouldn't want is two equally sized spaces like rectangles or circles, or you need to have a variety, and you can see the triangular areas that we have just here. The two triangles, they have the same kind of shapes, but they're different sizes. And you can see that we've looked around now. Have a quick sort of critique of this. To see, we put in the reflections coming down. Just let them blend and bleed away. Put in the whites as well. Overall, I'm pleased with the balance of this picture. There's a wide range of tone, from the lightest lights to the darkest darks and mid-tones as well. That's important for paintings in general, but obviously the light's coming from the sky, and that's the place where you're going to see the types of effects that we have here in the foreground. I'm just touching in with the tip of my finger, back of my finger, and I'm going to bring in a new little passage there, just a highlight which was bothering me a bit, and I've wet, so it's just going to blend and bleed. And again with the gouache there, just put it in and then let the paint and the water do its own thing. So we're getting close to the finish now. Hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. I should be doing several of these where I've begun paintings outside and then come into the studio to finish them off. If you're outdoors painting and it starts to rain, quickly turn your board over, your painting over, so you don't get it washed away. And final little piece I'm going to show you with my palette, is I'm going to look through the 15 colours that I have. So I'm going to line this up, and you'll see the 15 colours that I've used today. Actually, no, I haven't used 15 colours at all, but I have 15 colours in my palette. So thank you very much. We'll see you again next time.